Since joining forces with USADA in 2015, drug testing has become synonymous with modern MMA, so it's hard to believe there was a time the UFC allowed fighters to take legal steroids. Today, we look at one of the most divisive time periods in modern MMA, one whose exciting matches and knockouts were clouded by moral questions that remain to this day. Welcome to the INC, and this is the story of MMA's TRT era. While TRT had been used by fighters since the mid-2000s, it wasn't until 2010 that the practice entered the spotlight. At UFC 117, Anderson Silva defended his middleweight title against longtime rival Chael Sonnen. Sonnen had endured a journeyman career up until that point, with many expecting him to be a sacrificial lamb for Silva who'd made easy work of his previous title contenders. Sonnen, however, dominated the fight, rocking Silva during the rare striking exchanges and neutralizing the champion with takedowns and ground and pound. Sonnen was seemingly on the verge of an unprecedented upset win before Silva mounted a dramatic comeback to submit the wrestler in the dying stages of the fight. Both men saw their stock rise in the fight's immediate aftermath. Silva answered many of his critics following a maligned win over Damian Maia, while Sonnen's performance showed he was worthy of being considered a top-level middleweight. The goodwill, however, came to an end 4 weeks later, when Sonnen was flagged by the California State Athletic Commission for testosterone levels 17 times higher than the average American male. Sonnen would later admit to using synthetic testosterone, a banned substance classified as a steroid by anti-doping agencies like USADA, but claimed he'd received permission from a doctor to use the drug due to his low testosterone levels. In the eyes of Sonnen, he was receiving medicine rather than a performance enhancer, although some of his other claims during the hearing were questionable to say the least. Although Sonnen's one-year ban from competition was upheld, the Nevada State Athletic Commission allowed Sonnen a therapeutic use exemption, or TUE, to continue using testosterone replacement therapy, while also allowing other fighters to apply for exemptions provided they had low testosterone. In the months after the ruling, several fighters came forward regarding their use of TRT. Forrest Griffin and Frank Mir were among the first to apply for TUEs to use the drug, while former Pride champion Dan Henderson admitted to being on TRT as early as 2007. Those who defended TRT saw it the same way as Sonnen. Testosterone naturally lowers as males get older, so a method allowing fighters to remain competitive late in their careers was seen as a positive. The first warning signs, however, came when heavyweight fighter Todd Duffy received an exemption to use the drug in 2010. This despite being 24 years old and having one of the most impressive physiques in the sport. In an interview with ESPN, Olympic doctor Don Catlin claimed he'd only ever prescribed TRT for one athlete in the past 20 years. So how could so many healthy fighters suffer the same ailment all within a few months of one another? Most critics of TRT pointed to the other big factor in low testosterone: steroid use. The next 2 years saw a series of high-profile drug failures, all relating to elevated testosterone levels. Nate Marquardt was pulled from his main event with Rick Story at Fight Night Pittsburgh and subsequently released from the promotion as a result, while Alistair Overeem withdrew from his planned title bout with Junior Dos Santos after recording testosterone levels 2.5 times higher than the required limit. Overeem had been under scrutiny for his increased muscle mass around the time of the TRT epidemic, infamously attempting to defend his actions by suggesting his bulky frame was due to consuming horse meat. The moral dilemma of what many considered legal cheating was made worse by the in-cage action. Between 2010 and 2013, the UFC enjoyed one of the most successful eras in its history, with record-high ratings and an upturn in fight quality, many involving fighters who'd exploited the TRT loophole. Dan Henderson would win Fight of the Year honors for his epic war with Shogun Rua, while Mark Hunt's match with Bigfoot Silva at Fight Night Brisbane is still regarded as the greatest heavyweight fight in company history. Even if the match was tainted when Bigfoot tested positive, again, for elevated testosterone. It left the UFC in a quandary regarding their approach to TRT. During an interview in 2012, Dana White praised the procedure as an example of the advances in sports science. In countries without governing bodies, the UFC themselves served as the commission and allowed fighters therapeutic use exemptions. The sport's biggest promotion was not only allowing legal enhancers, but advising fighters to see a doctor so they could diagnose them with low testosterone. As long as they competed in unregulated jurisdiction, fighters were free to exploit this loophole as much as possible. The biggest example of this was former UFC champion Vitor Belfort. After returning to the promotion with a 3-1 record, Vitor was tabbed as a short-notice replacement to face light heavyweight champion Jon Jones in Canada, sporting a bulky, muscular frame unlike anything seen since his return. Vitor nearly shocked the world by catching Jones in an armbar early in the fight, before Jones was able to recover and submit the Brazilian in the 4th round. Vitor's performance and physique was immediately called into question, one that was vindicated years later when it was revealed Vitor had failed a pre-fight drug test but was still allowed to compete. Vitor returned to middleweight shortly after the fight, and despite being in his late 30s, embarked on one of the most destructive winning streaks ever seen in the sport, finishing Michael Bisping and Luke Rockhold with kicks before becoming the first man to finish Dan Henderson with strikes. Every fight taking place in Brazil, with Vitor boasting the same increasingly bulbous physique. The success, however, came at a price. Vitor was granted a UFC title shot against Chris Weidman at UFC 173, but doubts were raised over whether the Phenom would receive a TUE, partly due to the Brazilian failing a post-fight drug test, while competing in the state with pride. By this point, perceptions of TRT had taken a nosedive, and even Dana White, once an advocate for sports science, had turned his back on the process.
You're a guy that's not on TRT. You're just a naturally gifted athlete doing what you're supposed to be doing, which is just training, eating right, and doing all that stuff. And you know that you're going in against a guy who is on TRT and he got the exemption for it. And you're probably thinking this guy's probably been at this level his entire training camp and now leveled back off to here, to fight me. It's unfair.
The issue came to a head in February 2014, when the Nevada State Athletic Commission voted to ban therapeutic use exemptions for TRT, with the UFC agreeing to honor this ruling in international markets. A day later, Vitor formally withdrew from his bout with Weidman, being replaced by fellow Brazilian Lyoto Machida for a rescheduled bout at UFC 175. Vitor would eventually face Weidman for the middleweight title in May 2015, but the man who dominated his foes 2 years earlier was a shadow of his old self. Belfort appeared deflated during the pre-fight weigh-in and was quickly outmuscled by Weidman on his way to a first-round loss. Vitor would win just 2 of his last 7 fights with the UFC, with all of his losses coming by stoppage, including a front kick knockout to Lyoto Machida at UFC 224. A suspiciously jacked Vitor signed a deal with one championship, but despite teasing a comeback, never competed for the promotion during his 3-year contract, no doubt upsetting ONE's 10 billion viewers. Vitor's fate wasn't isolated. Although Dan Henderson would earn a middleweight title shot, many of the fighters synonymous with TRT suffered downturns in form once the practice was outlawed. The most infamous being Bigfoot Silva, who'd lose 10 of his next 11 fights across MMA, kickboxing, and bare-knuckle fighting, most recently in June this year for the Megdan fighting promotion in Serbia. TRT's legacy is hard to judge. It was a factor in one of the most exciting eras in MMA history and sparked a career run fans still speak about to this day. But the moral questions that come with its existence leaves a bad taste in many mouths. USADA's introduction means such an era will likely never return to MMA. These days, the UFC would never let a fighter compete despite knowing he was on performance enhancers. This is the INC. Please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a video.